we will call the meeting to order. Thank you for everyone for coming. All right, any declaration of conflicts?
I have a conflict on number 3, the 428 Green Street, and number 8, 12 Valley.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? All right, seeing none, can I get the approval of the agenda? And actually, before I do the approval, because we have a few people that are here to represent some of the applications, I just thought there's no sense them waiting out there. So here's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing switching number 8, which is 12 Valley Street, to number 1 on the agenda. And then number 14 on the agenda, which is Tim Horton Drive through May Point, looking to shift that to number 2 because we have the applicant out there. And then the lot 18-2 Sherwood Road, which is number 5 on your agenda right now, we'll bump that up to number 3. And then once those are done, we will return back to the normal order. Is everyone okay with those changes? Yes. Okay, so can I have approval for the agenda? Okay, moved. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. All right, adoption of the minutes from the September 8th meeting, please. Okay, moved. Thank you. Seconded. All right, all in favor? Okay, all right. Any business arising from the minutes? I look over at the mayor.
I just want to say happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Again.
I'll second it.
Well, you second it, I'll second it. And he plans to invite us out to a bite to eat afterwards. Huh?
Yes.
Since?
You already identified A&W. Get the onion rings ready, A&W. All right, no business arising from the minutes. We'll move into the report, so we'll start at number 8, which is the 12 Valley Street. Shalyn, yep, you're already gone.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a request that you're all familiar with. It's a request to subdivide a portion of 12 Valley Street, rezone said portion from the low-density residential R2 zone to the mixed-use corridor MUC zone, consolidate the rezone portion with the lands owned by the Provincial Credit Union. They have 2 different PIDs, but there's a total of 6 parcels. And then finally a variance to the flankage yard setback in order to construct a new addition. So I won't go through it all, but we had a public meeting on September 29th. There was a few concerns raised through the public feedback. We also received 1 letter of opposition, which is in your report. One concern raised was asking, was there a need to expand the parking lot? Even with the future expansion, the parking lot is never more than half full as is. So I indicated in the report that the parking requirement is based off the zoning and development bylaw. So while the space may not be used, there is a requirement based on square footage. So the parking likely is required, but until we get detailed floor plans of what they're proposing, we can't determine exactly how much is required. They also asked if the plans can be adjusted to keep mature trees and or landscaping. I'll show a plan in a minute here showing the landscaping. And finally, they asked if there would be a driveway onto Valley Street. As part of this application, they are retaining the existing house. So you can see on the plan, the existing house is on Valley Street, and there's the portion is in behind being consolidated. So the house will not be removed, and the consolidation would only be for the back portion. So this is the proposed addition. Again, it didn't require a public meeting, but it is required as part of this meeting. They're looking to reduce the required setback from 19.7 feet to 5 foot 2.5 inches. It is in keeping with the building to the bottom of the picture on the screen. And the final slide I have is that landscaping plan. So it illustrates a number of trees do have to be removed for the addition, but they are planting additional trees along the boundary, really all around the property. Some will be retained and what isn't, they'll be planting kind of to fill in the gap. So essentially staff is recommending for the rezoning application, the lot consolidation, and the variance to be approved, and I can answer questions if need be.
Thanks, Greg. So we do have Silva here. If anyone has any questions from this board for the for Silva who owns I think it's 9 yards. If we don't have any questions for her, but just for staff, then we'll just allow her to go home, sort of thing. So, any questions for staff, or do we want to bring Sylvie in to ask her any questions?
I'd just say at the public meeting, we did hear the only concerns really were the entrance and exit onto Valley Street, and they answered those questions good, so I'm okay. If there isn't a whole lot of discussion to move, that we accept staff's recommendation.
Okay.
To accept.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Councillor McCabe. So we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to approve. Okay, second it. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. If you want to...
The drive through the next item?
It is. If you want to tell Silva she can go home, unless she can hear me now, and Shallon back in here. So that is number 8 off the menu. So now we're going to 14, which is the Tim Horton drive-through. And everyone knows I have questions.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just ask clarification on this?
Yes.
Are we bringing in the engineer our engineer from Public Works, Mr. Scott Adams, to...
Mr. Adams is, unfortunately can't be here tonight. I hoped that he was going to be here tonight,
Right.
but he's got another issue so he won't be available, but I'm sure that he can be available for the council meeting if it's...
So, we're bringing him in, Alex, to go over the report. So the report that Mark McDonald did for 45 Towers Road, his traffic, wouldn't we get Scott in to go over that with us?
Well, Scott...
Because he's got a traffic background, right?
Yeah, I meant Mark is much better for that, as well as the person that did this report is in St. John. Of course, he's not available. I mean, these reports are, they're to be taken at face value in regard to that they put the professional stamp on it. I thought Scott would just be helpful. The last meeting, there were some fairly technical questions, and I began to answer them, and I thought, well, I'm not 100% certain, so I didn't want to be the one that was suggesting how it was going to work. So it's just a matter of, there are a couple of other issues that have come to light on this application as well, but if you want, I can present it and we go from there.
So,
yes, sir.
I'm just going to follow up. So if the engineers or someone's not here to answer the questions that have been asked, including the questions I've asked with regards to the crosswalk through 5 lanes of traffic and things of that nature. I mean, again, we've seen Towers Road is a perfect example. If we don't have a clear picture of everything being proposed, we're saying wait.
Yeah.
This one here, questions aren't being answered, but last time around it was go ahead. So I guess I'm trying to find a level of consistency here in how we're approaching these traffic reports, because again, the answers to my questions, being the representative of the area, were never answered, and they're still not answered. So again, we've not brought anybody in to answer them, but yet here we are again. So I guess I'm trying to find what the consistency level is of planning board and council, and what kind of direction we're going to go in the future when it comes to traffic studies.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm asking for a deferral until we have the Scott Adams here to address some of the questions or go over the report with us. So I'm asking for a deferral until we get him here. That's consistency on what we did with 45 Towers Road. Or the Sherwood Crossing.
Okay, so we have a deferral on the floor. Does anyone want to second the deferral? Okay, seconded by Deputy Mayor Councillor Cody.
Comment with deferral?
You may, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Alex, again, when you use the engineers, civil engineers too, put together these studies, like Mark McDonald was here last week to go over any questions that we might have
Right, yeah.
about the traffic study. I know that Councillor McCabe and I looked over the report. Like, I don't have an engineering background. My background is a core French teacher now, so that'd be like me giving you an assignment from a grade 6 student and say, listen, Alex, read it over and just give me some pointers or some of your evaluation, just give me your evaluation of the report. You'd probably say, well, I don't read French. Well, it's the same with the engineering reports. I have a brother who's an engineer, and I have a nephew who's an engineer, and the technical world that they live in, or that they work in,
Right.
is not the same world that you and I are. Like, you come from a planning background.
Right.
So if Scott is coming in to go over this report.
Scott,
could I just finish?
Yeah, sure.
If that's the case, could we not have, again, just looking at consistency, Mr. Chair, could we have Scott come in for Sherwood Crossing with Mark McDougall or Mark McDonald?
Well, Mark would be much better.
Yeah, I know, because he did the report.
Look, it's really up to council. The reality is that these professional reports are put together by professionals, and they've looked at it, and they put the professional integrity on the line.
Yes.
For the most part, they're fairly straightforward because of it, there are issues. Now, to Councillor Brevard's comments, I mean, I'm a little reluctant to get into, if you have very specific or detailed questions, I mean, it would be better that somebody else answer them. Scott would be answering, in this case, on behalf of the municipality, reading the report. Mark McDonald is our consultant on the other one. He's very different. We're paying him, so he should speak.
Just the last question. So Mark is the engineer for the CB Towers Road,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So we'd want a peer review.
Well, we had a peer review.
Yeah, but we could get a peer review from our own engineer on Towers Road too. That's what I'm saying.
But there's some complexity, and Sherwood Road has also got another engineer.
I know.
The developer has his own engineer, so
Yeah.
we're getting kind of paralyzed by how to move forward on these.
Yeah.
So the developer on Sherwood Road, he's had a study, and then we have a different study going on. So
Okay.
we have a macro study and a micro study.
So Alex, here's the thing that I find that we're struggling with a lot lately, is the fact that I get that the engineers are coming forward with a traffic report, which, listen, I appreciate the work they do, and I'm sure they are professional, but then all too often, the common sense approach is being applied to, and the answers aren't delivered from the report. So I get that the report is dealing with numbers and traffic counts and this and stuff, but then, when you talk to the councillor of the area, be it Trainer Street, be it Maypoint, be it Mall, they're the best judges of those areas are the people who live and travel them. So if there's continuously issues and a disconnect between numbers from a firm that doesn't reside here in Charlottetown, that doesn't travel it every day, that doesn't do that, but simply looks at numbers, and you apply the common sense against that, we're missing something. It's just we're cross. So I don't know how you better that system, but I think we're going to have to find a way to work with Public Works, to work with engineers, to work with planning staff, to find a better way.
Because even Mr. Adams is, I have great respect for, but Scott is not a traffic engineer.
But he's got a master's in intersections.
Well,
his thesis on intersections.
Right. But the reality is the best people are the traffic engineers preparing the reports. But I do appreciate your comments. If you have questions, the basic or general, I could answer them. But if you have very technical questions, as I said at the last meeting, I was a little bit reluctant to go too far. I don't want to mislead this group or the public in regard to my knowledge about the modeling that took place and prepare them. So if you're so desire. Having said that, I mean, this one has been deferred like for 2 years, so there may be some urgency. It's up again. It's a council decision. If we can coordinate with Mr. Adams or whoever, if you wish to have a special meeting on it, that could possibly be helpful, because these things, once you get into them, they're not. It's not like a variance. There's a lot of moving parts.
But why? Okay, Alex, just the last follow-up. Why not have someone come in then that
Well,
does the engineering? The reason I say that is because I've asked the question on the sidewalk and a turning lane or a right exit lane
Right.
only going into, and no one can tell me that that's safe for a crosswalk. I've talked to people in the province, and they're concerned about it. I've talked to the city. It appears to be a concern, but no one can formally address that it is a concern or how we're going to fix it. And then we talk about, I've showed pictures of the queuing. I mean, I saw 20 cars there the other night queued up.
Right.
And none of those people are going right into Charlottetown at 4 o'clock. The chances are, if they're going into Charlottetown, they're going North River. Why would they come out through Beach Grove to go out into the roundabout to get back into Capitol Drive to go back into a busy intersection? They're all queued to go Upton or Cornwall.
Right.
So again, if you have a right lane only, no one's going to use it in that situation. So we have the same problem. So again, no one is able to answer the questions. And I guess I know we need an answer on this, and I know we're continuing to defer, but until we get an answer to how this is going to play out, then it's pretty hard for council to have a gun to their head to say, hey, listen, you're going to have to give an answer because this is what we want. But we've never gotten what we wanted.
Right, like this would get put on the agenda. I had thought Mr. Adams could be here. Mr. Adams has got a...
Just something happened today.
Right, that he's indisposed and he can't be here. So I didn't send it here in thinking that Mr. Adams couldn't be here. That's why it was here. Thought Mr. Adams could be able to provide the clarity that he needed, but he's not here, so I defer to you folks in regard to how you want to deal with the application.
Okay, so we do have a deferral on the floor. Moved and seconded.
Question.
Okay, question called. All in favor of deferral? Opposed? Councilor Duran, are you on the line yet?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll go with the deferral. That's fine.
Sorry, you're good or opposed?
No, go with the deferral.
Okay, deferral. Okay. All right, so that's unanimous. Deferral. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So,
Alex.
Mr. Chair, could I ask, could we have a special meeting or bring in Scott or the engineer from St. John, whoever?
I think
Because I think this connects with the province too. It's their roundabout, it's not our roundabout.
I think so. Here's my understanding: is I don't think the province wants to come into a room with anybody. They want to keep their hands clear of this. They just don't want any traffic backing up into the roundabout,
yeah.
which is fair, okay? But I still think that we need to do our due diligence because, again, I talked to Scott Adams at one point. I don't mean to belabor this, but it was talking about phase one. If phase one's put in place, if it doesn't work, then we're gonna have to go to phase two. Then if phase two doesn't work, then we'll have to do phase three. But again, my question at the end of this, when we put this to a vote, is going to be pretty simple, and I'm going to be full disclosure. Why does the city continue to settle for this when this is the right answer? It's the same with building roads. It's the same with anything. Why don't we ask for the Cadillac version, as opposed to 2 years down the road spend money, taxpayers' money, to fix a problem that never should have been there? Because we had an opportunity as a council and a committee to fix it now. That's
in response to the mayor's comment, maybe leave it with me in regard to what we can do with it. Maybe I will confer with Mr. Adams in regard to what's a good time, and we may even go back to Crandall. We could do a WebEx.
Crandall
Would you be
St.
helpful?
John?
Yeah, right. He's the engineer. He's the traffic engineer that prepares the report that we're leveraging. So he and Scott would hopefully be both available. If you leave that with me, I'll see what I can do.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, WebEx them in, that's a good idea.
Right.
Perfect.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so 14 off the list, deferred. Thank you.
Sir.
All right, we're moving to number 5 on your agenda, which we pushed up to number 3, which is 18-2 Sherwood Road. Robert. You have to go back and find it. Sorry for the confusion. All those waiting out in the lobby are very grateful for the time you're taking to find it. Put Rosemary at the steering wheel.
Doing a good job, Rosemary.
You're doing great. All right, Robert, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The application before you tonight is a request to proceed to public consultation. This request is to amend the official plan designation for lot 18-2 Sherwood Road from industrial to commercial, and to amend the zoning and development bylaw zone of the property from business park industrial M3 zone to highway commercial C2 zone. The purpose of the redesignation and rezoning is to construct 3 separate apartment buildings that will result in 200 dwelling unit or apartment units. And the applicants, as stated in their letter of rationale, approximately 10% of which would be used for affordable housing. So that would be the criteria of either getting a subsidy from CMHC or the province. So this is the parcel. It's currently vacant and undeveloped. It's situated between Seafood Express, which is also an M3 Business Park Industrial Zone, on the corner of Malpeque and Sherwood. And on the other side, on the west side, is the Maritime Hydroelectric Station, or electric station. The lands to the north are currently held in reserve in the CDA zone. At present time, however, there are apartment units that are being constructed along Minajane Drive, which is just south of the subject property. And as you can see here on the screen, there's approximately 97 units for one development, 215, a 60 unit at 197, and 60 unit currently constructed at 219. So that's just to give some context of the surrounding area. This is the proposed site plan in which the applicant submitted. So as you can see, Minajane Drive would basically come along the east portion of the subject property and connect up to Sherwood. So that's kind of the outline of the surrounding area and how it would be developed if the designation and rezoning were to be approved. And that just gives a concept of the lot that we're looking at. So as you can see, the Minajane Drive extension would cross over and run west of the site. And Seafood Express is basically lot 18-1, and the proposed development's at lot 18-2. So again, tonight this is just a recommendation to proceed to public consultation. The applicant is here if there was any questions, and I can answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So we'll just leave it to the board first before we bring the applicant in, just in case there's no questions. But
I just have a really quick question. I'm just trying to understand. So the M3 zone to the C2, so commercial, why, isn't it R3 when we go to apartments? Why only there? Just
So
I understand moving forward.
Essentially, if you look at the zoning map here I have on the screen, the properties to the south are zone C2 as well. So those additional, those apartments that are currently under construction on Minajane Drive are zone C2. Okay. So the applicant was just proposing to go to a similar zone that was in the adjacent area, rather than going to an R3 zone. C2 still permits though for multi-apartment, multi-units within that zone.
R3 and R4, right? Under
Correct.
C2?
Okay, no, I just needed to understand clarification for those.
Councillor Cody.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your report, Robert. Not so much a question, just a few comments or observations. Sherwood Road's, we talk about traffic all the time, but Sherwood Road's a busy road. It's a narrow road. There's no sidewalks. There's no paved shoulders. It's a high traffic area. We're talking about land there for our future fire hall. We have Island EMS up the road. It's just I just feel it's a real, I'll say, an intense use. I don't know if that's the right word in terms of even adding that much traffic onto that road. I get a lot of calls now. I mean, it's a 60 along there. Everyone knows you don't go 60. I don't want to, beat a dead horse here on traffic, but it just I do have some concerns on that location. It's a pretty intense proposal for density wise. I know we have things in place. I mean, at the bottom of the hill, there's a waterway there. There's been a lot of work done to that to clean it up and have fish back in here. And I know we have procedures in place to mitigate runoff and stuff like that. But I just wanted to point out a few concerns. I know it's just to go to a public meeting, but that may be some of the feedback we get when we do go to a public meeting, if that's what the board so chooses.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're welcome. Rosemary, did you have a comment, question?
I had similar concerns too, Mr. Chair. So one of the limitations that you folks identified was about lack of property for industrial uses. So we switch it, to a different zone, and we're going to have less area in that industrial zone. And then secondly, it just doesn't seem like it's a great area to develop for residential use. I'm sure that there's probably 10% allocated for green space, but it's not a very highly serviced area for residential use.
Thank you, Rosemary. Any other question? Yes, Reg?
Is there any studies about building that close to a generation station?
It's a substation.
Substation, well, still produce a lot of power.
Yeah, well, there's one in UPI soccer fields just south of.
I know, but I just want to know if there's any studies or anything being done. I mean, you're putting a lot of bodies right beside there.
200 units.
I think the subdivision that's there as well would be in pretty close proximity to what they're proposing now. I think the
The one behind it.
Yeah.
That's why changing it to apartments is apartments.
So go ahead.
Is there any plans to widen that road to upgrade? Has that ever been talked about previously?
Robert, do you?
There's been discussion. I mean, I was asked for sidewalks, and I mean, there's only limited resources. I mean, I guess the reality of the situation as the road sits right now, it's narrow with no sidewalks and not even a paved shoulder. It's just, and it's an intent. I mean, you got the airport up there, like I say, get out of EMS, hopefully a new fire station in the area eventually.
Well, it is a main throughway
for sure.
trucks. Everybody heading over the Sherwood Road, hooking up to.
Yeah.
Is there any lights there at night? There's no lights either along that stretch.
I think there's a couple down at the lower end, closer to Lower Malpeck Road. That's where the houses are. And the other
residential.
So Robert, just a quick point of, I guess for my own curiosity, I heard, and I don't know if it's right or not, but I was reading through the report. So prior to this being subdivided to an M3 lot, is it true that it was previously a C2 lot?
No, it was actually, it was on holding zone, so it was a comprehensive development, and
Gotcha.
Mayortime Electric actually rezoned it. Went through an application back in 2001, and it went from a CDA zone, which is again a holding zone, to M3.
So that was the transfer. Okay, so what I was told was incorrect. Okay. Perfect. All right, any other questions or comments, or do we any questions or comments for the applicant?
And just to clarify, this is just to go to the public consultation.
This is to go to a public meeting. Yes.
Question?
All right. So I need a motion first before I put any question.
We want to go to a public consultation.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to proceed to a public consultation. Does anyone want to second the motion?
I'll second
Okay, seconded by Shalom, thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of proceeding to a public meeting, put your hand up. Opposed? Okay, Councillor Duran?
In favor?
Okay, motion is carried, I believe, everybody but two.
Who was opposed?
Well, that's okay, we don't need to say it.
You don't have to. You don't have
Not gonna call anybody out. That's okay. All right, moving on. So we're going back to the start of the program. So we're gonna go back to 1, which is the variances, and 42 Highland Avenue. Robert, you're still up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight, this application for Highland, there's two major variances that are being requested for an accessory building, a shed in the backyard. The first major variance is to vary the interior side yard from 1.2 meters, which is 3.9 feet, to 0.9 meters, which is 3 feet, and then to also vary the rear yard setback from 1.2 meters to 0.3 of a meter. So essentially, this has a history of non-compliance in regards to the construction of the shed. The owner built the shed without a permit. That was then reported by one of the neighbors. City staff went to investigate the report, and it found out that it was indeed built without the necessary approvals. It was also determined at that time that the accessory building was located too close to the rear and one of the interior side lot lines. So the owner was given two options: one to relocate the shed to meet the required and minimum setbacks of the zoning bylaw, or to apply for major variance, two major variants in fact. So the owners elected to apply for two major variances. At this time, that's kind of the site plan right there that shows the location of the shed. It's right in the southeast corner of the lot, straddling both the interior side and rear property lines. We did receive some feedback when we circulated letters on the variance. We received two letters. One letter was of support from an adjacent owner. The other letter was a letter of objection from one of the other adjacent owners that's impacted by the shed. And the letter of support really didn't give a rationale for the support, but the letter of objection did. They, again, were objecting to the fact that a shed was built without a permit, and to grant an approval, forgiveness rather than permission, they found to be in conflict with the bylaw and the nature of community planning, as well as they found that the structure was too large and situated too close to the property lines. So that was the feedback we received on this application. And again, I can answer any questions that the board might have.
Thanks, Robert. Any questions or comments from the board? Yes.
Isn't this the third meeting in a row that we've had a request for something that's already been? There was one on Matter Road. There was the Kensington Road, and now this one.
Correct.
Is there nothing we can do with it? Or is there anything we can put in place to discourage that?
It's in the works.
That's why we need summary offense ticketing. That's where we're working on
The province. We're working with the province to give us that ability to be able to do
And how
so.
significant will that be?
Like a fine.
How much, like, if,
Well, it varies in Halifax. It goes up to 250, 500.
Right now, our only means to be able to fine somebody is by filing a court injunction through the court, which is timely and expensive for the city to do so. If we get the ability through the province to be able to fine people, then it'd be as enforceable as the police act, which would have these summary tickets, due basically as 30 days from when you issue them. So they would count. You wouldn't have to go to court and file a court injunction to stop something or do something. So right now the Planning Act is really not supported. There's not small. I guess our bylaws aren't really supported by anything that gives us enforcement. So we can fill your mailbox full of newspaper or full of papers, but until we file with the courts. But anyways, we're working on it. Can they not move the shed? To me, the obvious question is how big is this shed? And can it not be moved 1 foot by 2 feet?
It's a 120 square foot shed. They expressed difficulties of relocating the shed because that's obviously staff's preferred option was to just avoid the variance process entirely and have them just move the shed. But they were adamant about proceeding through the variance process.
Does the shed, is it allowable size to fit on the lot, first of all?
It is of the allowable size,
Okay.
given the area of the lot. And in this instance, it also falls under the minimum size requirement for a lot drainage plan. But I know that was some concerns that one of the neighbors had was the fact that the shed was situated so close to the property line. They were concerned that the drainage running off the building would start impacting their property.
Okay, so if we vote this variance down tonight, they're going to have to move the shed.
If you recommend to council, yes, to vote the variance down and that's upheld, then enforcement action would have to be taken by our office to have them relocate the shed.
And what about getting a permit for the shed that never had a permit to build it?
They did submit for a permit after the fact, so they did submit that to us. Yes.
All right.
Was that just built, or was this built a long time ago and you guys just realized it was?
This was constructed in 2019.
Okay, so like over a year.
Yes, and then the complaint came in and we had to take action on this.
Okay.
Your recommendation is to reject it?
Yes, based on our analysis, there's really no unique circumstance in this instance that would provide undue hardship for an applicant to adhere to the required setbacks. As you can see, it is a fairly large lot, and they could theoretically adhere to the minimum 4-foot requirement on each side. So we recommended rejection on the variance.
I see.
I know, because my question is, and we just talked about the enforcement piece, so we recommend the council to reject it. It comes to council, they reject it, now they gotta move the thing, but does he? Otherwise you take it to court?
Effectively, current practice now is that we
Would that be
would have to
enforcement?
elevate it to our city solicitor, in which they would then send out a notification to the property owner to move or relocate the structure. But yes, effectively, it could end up.
But I don't think that should be a deterrent from
Nope.
the planning board or staff to be going ahead, because if that's the case, then we're just going to tuck our tail between our legs every single time and say we're not doing it because here's the hurdles that we have to jump. At the end of the day, it's still wrong.
And we can issue a fine, can't you, or double their permit or something?
We doubled the permit fee, correct?
Already, okay.
Sometimes it's about the message. Versus
Yes, we've already set precedent, have we not? We did it on another road.
That application was actually deferred until regulations came in that dealt specifically with garden suites,
Right.
specifically with the built form and what's the size of what a garden suite could be in the city of Charlottetown, and maybe having specific design guidelines or setback requirements that were different from the accessory building
But
requirements.
whatever way you look at it, Robert, we did give an exception to the rule. Like, in the end, we did. We just bent and curved the rules. That's why I'm saying I'm against the rejection. We've already checked off this box with another couple of homeowners, and you know what? If we don't start doing something about Alex, with this summary offense ticketing, we're going to just keep running into this issue. So, thank you, Dan Robert.
So what's his penalty right now?
The penalty currently is that he was doubled building permit fee.
Which is how much? How much money are we talking?
$100. And as of to date, since he made an application to correct the situation through applying to the variance process, we haven't taken any further action until a decision is made on the variances.
Here's my concern with regards to just saying, I appreciate what the mayor has just suggested, but again, we have bylaws in place for a reason, and they're there to protect neighbors, everyone else. If we simply just, again, turn our blind eye to breaking the rules, then what protection are we giving any of the residents of the city that there's an expectation to follow if we continue to say, well, we can't do anything, so let's just approve it? Because I'm guessing that they're just going to continue getting worse and worse and worse. I personally think you just need to continue down the road. The bylaws is there for a reason. We set that unless we change the bylaw and amend the bylaw to allow this. I'm a firm believer of following by the rules.
Oh, so am I, Mr. Chair. I'm a firm believer, but we've already set precedent because common law is based on precedents. So we've already sort of checked off this box. We have to put in a summary offense ticketing. If we don't do that, we're going to be running into this more and more and more. And I don't know how long we have to talk about this issue. Like for example, I'm looking at the Halifax bylaw. They have everything down under here. Owning prohibited animal is a fine for that, and minimum maximum fine. So, but we're not breaking new ground by establishing summary offense ticketing. The models are already out there, so.
Your worship, thank you. And two different things though. I mean, again, when we talk about setting a precedent, the key is that we're also setting a precedent by saying follow the rules. So it can be looked at both ways, right? So it's not about following the precedent, breaking the rules. I'm convinced that setting the precedent to say you need to follow the rules is probably a better path to take, personally, for anybody. So anyways, we do have a motion on the floor to reject planning board's recommendation to reject. So I guess it's to allow for these variances to go through. So do I have anyone to second that motion?
Who moved it?
You moved it.
Moved to reject it?
You moved to reject cities or the housing staff's recommendation to reject the variances. You're saying go ahead.
What's the resolution? Is there
The planning recommendation is to reject the variance request.
Okay, we'll put the resolution on to reject it, and I'm not moving that.
Okay, so no one wants to second anyway, so it's a dead motion. So anyone want to put a motion on the floor to?
I move that we accept the departments.
Okay, we have a motion to accept staff's recommendation. Okay, seconded by Basil. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, Councillor Duran?
In favor.
Okay, motion is carried. All right, number 2, reconsideration, for 385 Queen Street. This is the 10 unit. This is the 10 unit, Horton, Costello, and Queen.
Costello.
Yes.
Report a little bit.
All right, Robert, whenever you are ready.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for everyone's, just to bring everyone up to speed, this application was to demo the existing structure, the duplex on site, and then to construct a 10-unit apartment. 2 units of which were going to be used for affordable housing, according to the applicant. This application was recommended for approval. It was went to council on July 13th and was approved. Since that time, one of the surrounding residents that objected to the initial application has filed for both a reconsideration of council's original decision of approving the proposed development, as well as they have filing an application with IRAC. Of course, IRAC is pending the hearing until the decision on the reconsideration is determined by council. So that's in abeyance until a decision is made. So just to take the planning board through, that is Costello Lane. So you can see there that Costello Lane is considered a local street, and Queen Street, in which this photo is taken from, is considered or classified as a collector. So in this situation, you would have Queen Street as a higher order street because it collects traffic from local streets, and then you have local streets which just really diverts local traffic to uses along that street. So there it is, zoned R3, so already has the entitlements to develop a 10-unit apartment. It was only really going for a variance, and it was a minor variance, in fact, for a side yard setback. Anyway, so continuing on, again, that's kind of an ortho view of Costello Lane, and then you can see Queens running parallel with that. That's the proposed site plan that the applicant was proposing. So the 10-unit apartment building was going to be situated fronting onto Queen with parking to the rear of the site. And access was going to be obtained off of Costello Lane. And there is already an existing access point. Just to show you back there, that's the existing access point, which is a little closer to the intersection than what our bylaw requires. It requires a minimum of 50 feet. To ensure that there's adequate queuing and spacing for vehicles leaving the site and then queuing up at an intersection. In this case, it's the intersection of Queen and Costello. which you can see right there. So the applicant decided to shift the access point further back and then direct all traffic onto the local street, which is Costello Lane. So when it comes to reconsideration, there was specifically, was there any new information, any new materials, facts, or evidence that was brought to light since the original decision was made? Was there a change of circumstance that has occurred? And then last but not least, was there a clear doubt as to the correctness of order of the decision in the first instance? So did the planning board and council follow the correct procedures? So the applicant in their submission has maintained that there was two things that was aired that they stated. So the first one was that an independent traffic report, given the increase of density from 2 to 10 units, to analyze the impact of increased traffic in the area, was not conducted or submitted to staff or council for review. And then the second that they argue is that council erred in its interpretation of applicable bylaws. In this instance, it would be the street access bylaw. So the city of Charlottetown has a street access bylaw. Essentially, if you modify or create a new access, it has to go through a process whereby it goes to a committee that the police oversees. And they basically look at the access points of like safety, public works. In this case, Mr. Adams, the manager of public works, provides comments on whether it can be considered safe and adheres to good traffic principles. So that was the applicant's submission for reconsideration. So basically, when we look at the reconsideration itself, and I will first start with the independent traffic report. So the bylaw or portion of the bylaw that they quote is that staff did not require an independent traffic assessment, and that is true. However, section 6.312 of the zoning bylaw does state a traffic study may be required for any development or proposed subdivision in the city, and it would be reviewed by both Public Works and Police Departments. So staff, in this instance, elected not to require a traffic study for the following reasons. Reason number one is that the property already had prescribed development rights as an R3 zone. Two, the development actually maintained an existing access point on Costello Lane, which is a local street, following standard planning and TAC principles, so that's the Transportation Association of Canada. It's engineered standards created and developed by engineers for best practices on how to handle traffic onto streets. States that ingress and egress points should be directed to lower order streets. In this instance, Costello Lane, since it is a local street, and Queen Street is collectors. And then third, the existing access point was moved further away from the intersection of Costello Lane and Queen Street, thereby providing additional queuing space for any traffic that might be leaving the site or any from the subject site or any property located on Costello Lane. So in this instance, a traffic study was not decided or decided or recommended because the applicant was just adhering to all best practices when it comes to handling traffic and designing their site. So in this instance, the staff had no concerns with that, and with consultation with Public Works, it was decided that a traffic study would not be required. In the instance of the second clause for reconsideration by the applicant, in that they argue again or state that there was an error interpretation of the street access bylaw. Staff maintains that if the minor variances were approved, then the proposed access point and design would be submitted to the committee for review and approval. So pending that they approve it, then a decision would be made whether to grant access or not, since he was modifying the access by moving it back. So again, that was staff's reconsideration analysis that was conducted. Again, those are the requirements under the street access bylaw, as well as that the development generally followed our requirements under zoning bylaw by distancing the access onto a local street further away from an intersection and following tax standard best practices. So then in this instance, because it is staff's opinion that the reconsideration put forth by the applicant does not meet the threshold test, that the reconsideration be rejected.
All right, thank you, Robert. Questions or comments? Anybody?
I'm just gonna move that we accept staff's recommendation to reject the reconsideration.
Okay. Okay, moved and seconded. Perfect. Is there any further discussion? I do have just a couple of quick questions just for my own, and I should know the answers to this, but I don't. When do staff require a traffic study to be completed on a project? Do we have a set rule that says that if the density or intensity of a project is X amount, that a traffic study is required, or is it something that's just kind of arbitrary that we?
Generally, it is left to staff's discretion on, again, when a traffic study is required.
Okay.
We do take into account, though, when we're reviewing a proposal, especially when it involves increased traffic, we do go to police and public works, again, for recommendation whether a traffic study is required or not. In this instance, we did not, because the applicant was taking all precautions to, again, divert traffic to a local street, distance the access point away from the intersection. So in this instance, it was felt that a traffic study would not be required.
The other question or comment I have, and I know
Mr. Chair.
that
So Robert, Queen Street is a north-south street. It's a very busy street like University Avenue, like Norwood Road. So the residents that live within this proposed project, if you go back to the bylaw itself, may, of course it's not shall, but again, I think I'm going to vote against the rejection because I believe that the more information we have, the better educated we are, whether it's site-specific development like this one right here, or it's a big development similar to what we have out on Towers Road, or what we have out at the roundabout in May Point. More information, you have more knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Mr. Chair.
yes, Mr. Forbes.
Again, I think we have to be careful of these traffic studies. We're going to be doing traffic studies for everything or for nothing. And when for years we didn't do any traffic studies. Traffic studies should be held for very unique circumstances, and they're typically not. This is a local street, and local streets can handle an incredible amount of traffic. I know that residents on local streets don't like that. When you typically ask for a traffic study, it's when it's interfering with an arterial roadway, which is a busy, busy street, or compromising a collector street, which, you know, we have a number of collectors. So, you know, it's not hard and fast, but it's very hard for staff to, unless it's laid out in policy, and we're here to take your direction. But it just seems that just recently it's very topical in regard to traffic studies, but I mean, we weren't doing any traffic studies for years.
Not to mention that this property is permitted eight units.
Correct.
Based on zoning as of right, that wouldn't, so this is
This is a
additional.
relatively small development. I mean, it's, and its impact, and what, you can put a 48 unit apartment building on a local street, and that, what I guess the public don't realize, and the traffic engineer who deals with this, is a local street can handle thousands of cars. But there's never that level of intensity on it. It's where it's going to interfere with an existing busy street, or it's on a corner, or it's like the one for Capitol Drive with next to a roundabout. There are fairly obvious ones where they can get triggered, and then some are, you know, you folks could direct us to get it done through public input. But I don't think the intent was ever to get these traffic studies on every development, and particularly this is a relatively small development. I know for the neighbors, it's 12 more cars on the street, but that street can clearly handle it in most of the circumstances. Thank you.
Councilor Mcrae.
And it is, I'm just clarifying, and as of right onto Costa Lane with that new bill, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor to accept staff recommendation to reject, and it was seconded.
Yeah.
Is there any further?
Yeah, just again, this is my second time to speak on this, Mr. Chair. So, you know, Alex just stated that previously the traffic studies weren't done, so you can look at our streets and look at our roads. We have major congestion. Especially during the summer, not this summer because of COVID-19, but previous summers, it's the congestion on our neighborhood streets, the bypass, it's getting more and more an issue. And I see that these studies, now, do we pay for the study? No, the study would be paid by the developer, correct? So we would be getting information that we could be using in the future. That's why I'm asking for more information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so let's put it to a vote. Councilor Duran, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you clarify what we're voting for? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so the vote is, so staff's recommendation is not to reconsider the decision that council made a month or two ago. And staff's recommendation, again, is to reject the reconsideration because there's not enough evidence to warrant a reconsideration based on staff's opinion and our solicitor. Does that sum it up? That's what we're voting on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. All in favor? Opposed?
I'll go opposed.
Okay. Motion is carried. So just quickly on that, since we're off this application, why, I guess I asked this question before staff, why does reconsideration, if it doesn't meet certain thresholds through staff and our solicitors, why does it circle back around the bend to us again? Because all it does is put council and planning board in a kind of a precarious situation that we're reviewing something that our solicitors are saying shouldn't be reviewed because there's not enough information to warrant a review. So all it does is give an opportunity for an applicant to lobby or residents to lobby against planning board and stuff when, you know what I mean? So I think that I think it should meet a threshold to even get here myself. If it doesn't meet the threshold of staff and a solicitor, then I think it dies right there, and the council's decision is. Does that make sense? I just think circling back around and then having to reject again, it just makes it harder sometimes for elected officials to have to deal with it.
Keep going in circles.
Yeah. Is that something
Mr. Forbes is?
We are working with amendments and we will be bringing them forthwith.
Brilliant. All right.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Forbes.
Okay, moving on. Rezonings, number 3, Robert. That's what we did. No, 428 Queen Street? That's yours. And Shallon is gone again.
All right, so this was before planning board last month. Again, just to go over quickly, it's the McLean Bike Shop. All the proposal I'm doing is to consolidate a couple of lots together, so it's under one ownership. They're utilizing 428, which is just north of that corner lot there. That house was demoed in 2018. It's now being used for parking for the McLean Bike Shop. They just want to rezone and then also redesignate the lots to commercial. So effectively just to legalize and clean up some of the property ownership lines at this site. When I went to public meeting last month, there was no feedback. We received no letters of objection or support in regards to this application. So we're recommending that the lot consolidation as well as the rezoning and redesignation be approved.
This is a pretty straightforward application, I think. Just clean up. It's good. Yes. Any questions, comments? Anybody want to put a motion on the floor?
Will be accepted.
Okay, perfect. Moved and seconded and third and fourth. All right. All in favor? Opposed? Councilor Duran?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Motion is carried. All right, moving on to 168 Weymouth. Robert, you've been a busy planner this month.
It's been doing a lot of work.
Job security, right?
Teacher, you work hard.
So this application again was before the board. last month. This one, again, was a redesignation and a change to the zone. The redesignation change was from downtown neighborhood to downtown mixed-use neighborhood, as well as the zone follows the same designation. The purpose or the intent of the rezoning and the redesignation was to establish a professional office, so an accountant's office, on the first 2 floors, with the 3rd floor retaining a residential unit. Just so the board can see, everything outlined in pink is downtown neighborhood. So downtown neighborhood is the only pure residential zone in the 500 lot area. So basically, you can do like, the only extent of commercial operations you can do in a downtown neighborhood zone is like a home occupation, but that falls secondary to the primary use, which should be residential. Effectively, the zone and redesignation requests, the change by the applicant, would basically institute a new residential commercial hybrid zone and designation, first of its kind, at least within the vicinity. There are policies, and I go through that in my report, specifically the 500 lot plan that does state that any property surrounding heritage squares should be used and kept for residential purposes. So again, this goes back to looking at what the policies state, what the regulations state, and then also the land use compatibility standpoint. So, you know, there is institutional zone adjacent to there. I know that there is some commercial uses, specifically the laundromat, that is across the square itself, but those were pre-established uses that predate even the 500 lot plan. But when that 500 lot plan came into effect and the unique designations and zones were created, it was created for the express intent and purpose to maintain, specifically around heritage squares, to keep it a residential character and to keep that neighborhood compatibility. So that was staff's recommendation. We actually recommended not to proceed to public meeting. However, it was decided to go to public meeting, in which it did. Just some of the limitations that I wrote, but that's also in the report on page 6. And the feedback we received was quite a bit. In this instance, we received 6 letters of objection from surrounding neighbors. There was also multiple people that were in attendance during that public hearing that also spoke in opposition of the application. Also specifically, the neighboring property at 166 Weymouth Street, Amber Mack, who conference called in over WebEx. She expressed some concerns, not just with the introduction of commercial use in an established residential area, but also some concerns with a shared driveway access that they share with 168. And according to her and some of the neighbors, it's quite tight access, and there's issues, especially in the winter, with snow clearing. So the public feedback is there and is also attached to your reports. But essentially, staff is recommending that the change in zone and designation be rejected. And I can answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions or comments? Yes.
What is the boundary of Old King Square? What's the inside boundary?
Yeah, so essentially, Old King Square is you have that green space,
Yes.
right? So the OS
Is it
zone.
just the square itself?
Yeah, it's just the square itself.
Okay.
In the 500 lot area plan, though, it does speak to heritage squares, because as you know, we have 4 of them. And it does state that residential properties, it should be kept in residential character. So that residential, the neighborhood feel shouldn't be compromised, so it should be stayed as such as residential. The point of the downtown mixed-use neighborhood zone as well was a transitional zone from the downtown neighborhood to downtown mixed-use neighborhood, which then goes into either your downtown main street or downtown core. So the whole point of the DMUN zone was to provide that transition from purely residential, which is downtown neighborhood, to more commercial uses such as downtown Main Street or downtown core. So again, just from a land use compatibility standpoint, the way that the zones and the designation were arranged I believe that the intent and purpose of policies is to retain these areas as purely residential with the DMUN, again, as you can see, south, east, and west of that block, then transition into a downtown mixed-use neighborhood, which then further transitions into a downtown core or downtown Main Street, which is basically commercial. So that's the analysis.
I know what you're saying. When you take a drive around that block, there does seem to be a fair indication of commercial business.
Yeah, like I said previously, there is a laundromat down there to the south. There's also the clay on a bar. Those uses, though, again, I'll just state, predated the 500 lot plan, so they can continue to exist.
Right. Doesn't make them any less commercial. We've been there for a long time.
That's correct.
All right.
So,
Any
Mr.
other
Chair,
comments? Yes, sir.
I grew up in that square. My brother still lives at 21 Old King Square, so Bobby's right. On the corner of Kent and Weymouth, there's Stearns Laundry. Then on the corner of Fitzroy and Weymouth, there is the ADL. And then up on the corner of Houston and Weymouth, there's the Kent's Corner. Yeah, all around that area, it's been commercial. Yeah, but you know what? I think since the 500 lot plan has been implemented, it's to protect the residential integrity of that of those heritage squares, because these squares are part of the old, when the city of Charlottetown was laid out, these squares, and the center one being Queen Square, where your Province House is the queen of the middle of the pack. But Robert, if we reject this, could he apply for a home occupation permit?
Yes, so that's one conversation I did have with the applicant.
Does that go through the same process?
In this instance, it would go through a major variance process because it would be appointment based. But when I discussed his operations, his intent is not to have it as a home occupation. Like, this was going to be a full-blown accountant's office. So there is going to be multiple accountants with offices there, and he did state that, you know, they do most of their work remotely, but he does have clients that do come and visit the site. And he did state that he was located at 199, which is just up the street on Weymouth, and he was outgrowing that space. So then he wanted to relocate to this space, which is a residential use. So when I was discussing the options before him, that was certainly an option I provided, but he did state that he wanted to make it a full-blown commercial use. Yes.
Full-blown as in first and
second story,
and the third
correct,
remaining
yes.
apartments.
Yeah, so the residential would be basically secondary
Yeah.
feature
Yeah.
rather than the reverse of what a home occupation should be.
Right.
Yeah.
Bobby.
Yeah, this is my cranky note, I guess. I just have one more comment. In your report here, you listed the other concerns that were raised by surrounding residents. Number 3 says, a resident commented on the surplus of commercial space that is available and could accommodate a commercial office in downtown, thereby negating the need to rezone another property to accommodate a commercial use. And when I read that, I felt it didn't really reflect the conversation of the public meeting as I remember it. So I'm back to the minutes, and yeah, Mr. Glant did indicate, I'll read it here. Mr. Glant felt that there's no need to further encroach on residential neighborhoods. Mr. Keogh, he's the applicant, asked if all the available spaces are as big as the property in question in order to meet their needs, and also asked if these properties are for sale or just rental spaces. And Mr. Glant responded that it is a combination of spaces for rent and for sale, but majority would be for rent. So I don't really think that's reflected accurately in your report there in number 3. And it's just one-sided.
Yeah, again, when it went back to the public meeting, we attached public feedback as part of the attachments of the report. But generally speaking, when we were focusing on like public feedback, and in that instance, was Mr. Glant was trying to argue that, well, there's tons of commercial spaces, right, in the city. You know, that's something that could be considered. Yes, there's commercial spaces, but we don't consider that in our analysis when we're presenting a recommendation. When we're presenting a recommendation, it's based on the use for that property. and that property owner. So that, again, but yes, your point's well taken, that that was something that was conveyed to the owner or the applicant. And I believe the applicant also further stated that they were looking at ownership rather than rental because they wanted to make modifications to their office space.
Yeah. They want to be able to maintain it the way they want it.
Correct.
As opposed to the landlord.
That's correct.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. And I think I appreciate your better explanation tonight because I know I struggled when I thought, you know, the Bedford McDonald house is 2 doors down and all the surrounding area is commercial, but understanding that they were there prior to the 500 lot rule, also the parking is a huge concern there. I mean, I went down and looked and there is no parking at all. So for me, that altogether has led to my vote tonight.
Thank you. Rosemary?
Great.
Thank you. And Robert, I just had a question. So if the spot zoning is changed, does that carry forward with the property if this applicant was to proceed by the property, sell the property at some point down the road? The rezoning carries with the property.
That's correct. Yeah, and then theoretically, any commercial use such as an eating establishment could occur in the DMU zone.
I wonder if we're going to start seeing more of this in the kind of the back end of COVID, where businesses are struggling to pay rent and things of that nature. I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing more of a shift towards these type of homes where they can locate an office on the first and second floor, but use the rent of the third to help subsidize some of the rent. I'm just wondering if that's going to be a real thing. And I don't know if this is the case in this or not, but I'm just saying moving forward through COVID, I wonder if that's going to be a concern that we're going to face.
Well, and to build on that point, Mr. Chair, is that, you know, under current regulations for a home occupation, because more people are working from home now with COVID-19, that, you know, that's secondary to the residential use, but that any home occupation that has appointment-based visits, so people, clients showing up on site would have to go through a major variance process. That's something to definitely consider and look at, that if we do start, or if the board starts to see more applications for these types of uses, that maybe then a change is more warranted to the zoning bylaw rather than to each individual application.
But the home occupation doesn't change the bylaw, it just gives a variance.
Yeah, so under home occupation, if you have appointment-based business, so clients are coming on site, that requires a major variance outright, so they would have to go through this process.
Right, but it still stays as a downtown neighborhood.
That's correct, but the entitlement, yes, the entitlement stays as is, and therefore the zone is protected and not compromised by the introduction of a spot zone.
Because as Rosemary said, if you change the zone is changed forever until we change it back, so.
But the whole idea of a home occupation would be that you're residing there as well.
That's correct.
Versus, okay. All right, any other comments or questions? And if not, then we need to put the motion on the floor.
To accept the staff's recommendation.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to reject the rezoning. Seconded by Rosemary. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed?
I'm opposed, Chris.
Okay, motion to reject wins. 6-4 or 7, whatever the number may be. All right. What's that?
We didn't have to break the tie.
That's right, it was close. I didn't even think of that. I started getting nervous now. I knew which way I was going. You'll hear the council. Towers Road, 45 Towers Road, and hi Laurel, welcome.
Hi. You've got a busy agenda.
I can introduce you to planning board. No.
Oh, yeah. I'm not familiar with them.
Okay. You leave right now? You leave now? Okay. All right. What's that? Yeah, we still got quorum. Yeah. All right. Goodbye, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we're all familiar with this project on Towers Road. The owner's Calvin Mcrae, and the application is to amend the existing development concept plan. from a 90-bed community care facility with 8,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor to a 74-unit apartment building. The zoning and development bylaw requires that any amendments to a development concept plan has to go through a public meeting process and has to be approved by council. The public meeting was held on September 29th, and we did send a notification letter out prior to the public meeting. We received 4 letters in response to the notification letter, and all 4 letters were in objection. At the public meeting, there was one resident that spoke, and she had a few comments. Mainly comments circled around both in the letters and at the public meeting about sustainability, access to the Confederation Trail with cars crossing, a green space, amount of parking on site, and just basically trails throughout the development. Council also inquired about energy efficiency in the building, and the architect that was present spoke to that. The applicant, Diane Mcrae, was also present. She was representing her brother Calvin, and she spoke about the rationale for the request for asking for the amendment to the development concept plan. And when the development concept plan was approved a number of years ago, the Mcraes actually requested the community care at the time. There was in the rationale, they stated that there was a requirement at that time. There was more demand for community care. Now they're required to meet a means test, and that residents going into these facilities, they have to be able to prove that they can support themselves within these facilities, whereas nursing homes, they're government supported. So there's been a shift, according to the developer, to keep people in their own homes more so than placing them into this type of care. So the developers feel that there isn't as much demand. Staff aren't able to determine what the market demand is for that type of facility. Would take considerable amount of research, but we do know that this area, we deal basically with land use. So this area of the city, either use community care facility or a 72-unit apartment building is compatible, 74, sorry, is compatible for that area of the city, and would work with the land uses in the area. The area is located close to shopping centers, transit, it's all within that area. It's walkable, the trails are there. So it is an appropriate area to locate housing. And there is also a demand for housing, and there is a demand, I would say somewhat, in the community for community care. Changing the intended use of the official, or the comprehensive development plan, it does kind of shift the overall nature of the plan, but it still is an appropriate use what they are proposing. So staff feel that that what they are proposing is still in line with the objectives of our official plan, and it is appropriate for the area because it is located next to various amenities and transit. So we are recommending for approval of the request to amend the development concept plan.
Thank you, Laurel. Any comments or questions? Councillor Cody.
I just have one.
Okay, Councillor Duran, go ahead.
Well, I don't understand. I mean, this plan has been changed so many times, and I'm continuously told, you know, that it's a living document, it can be changed. You know, I'm just wondering, like, if we looked at this 10 years ago when the plan was approved, you know, it would have been approved with all the departments. We keep saying that there's a housing, you know, crisis. We're putting 1,000 units or close to that in this area or this side of the street and up Pine Drive. I mean, it just seems to me that, you know, a different use might be better. I I can't understand staff because all this development is just, I don't know how we're gonna live in it. I mean, you were talking before about, if the council knows the area, I just find with all these apartments in this one area, it's just gonna be a major concern of, the green space has been gone. There was supposed to be lovely parks in that area. Now we're expanding more and more apartment buildings. The green space is going. It never came. So, I can't support another change in this. So, thank you for your time. I just wanted to voice my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Drawn. Laurel, do you want to comment on?
I just wanted to comment, the green space is still there. The portion of parkland that the developer agreed to deed to the city when the comprehensive development plan was approved in 2013 was deeded to the city, and it is there. And it's adjacent to the trail. They haven't used that for any form of development.
Could I just respond to that, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Wasn't there supposed to be a green space right up from Mount Edward Road where people could walk down to the trail? I didn't see that there, but I haven't seen an updated plan. I guess that's the problem.
No,
Go
the
ahead.
green space was located at the back of the property near the trail. And then there's a walking path from Mount Edward Road down to the park.
Okay, just a walking path.
Just a walking path. That's all that was approved.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, so I have a question from first Councillor Cody, and then Councillor McCabe, and then Rosemary, and then Basil. All right. Councillor Cody.
I'm not sure if you know, but do you know if the footprint from the community care facility, will that be larger or smaller than the proposed apartment building? I'm just wondering, everyone's talking about the green space and the parking, which is a concern. Is the building itself going to be the same size, just basically a change of
Looking
use?
at the site plan, it looks like it was about the same size. And the thing with the community care, there was no underground parking. They're proposing 50 spaces underground with this development.
Yeah, I guess that just, so thank you. And I guess we go over to the other side of the street, we're talking about traffic and master traffic plans and stuff. I'm just wondering, going from a community care facility to an apartment building, what's your thoughts on traffic flow from basically those two different uses? I think that would add to the traffic congestion in that area.
Well, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I mean, with a community care facility, you're going to have staff going. There would probably be 2 or 3 shifts a day. You're going to have people visiting, family members. So people that are going there, the residents themselves wouldn't be traveling, leaving the facility, but you're going to have staff and you're going to have visitors on an ongoing basis, where if you have residents in an apartment building, then a lot of times, because of this area where they're living, they may not require a car, or they may, be at an age where they don't want to drive. So it's, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But I would tend to think it would be a little busier with the community care facility, because you're essentially it's a hospital sort of.
Councillor Cody, anything else? No? Okay. Councillor McCabe.
Okay, and mine's parking too, because I know they said 50 underground and then maybe 30, maybe 40 above ground, and I just, with 72 units, that would leave, if they put 30, they'd have 8 visitors in the building.
So the bylaw only requires 1 parking space per unit, and that was because we, at one time, we require 1.25 spaces, but because of sustainability issues, it was reduced down to 1 space per unit. Because we're trying to encourage people to drive less and take transit and walk more and those types of things. And because of that area, where there is transit available, there's less of a requirement.
It's just not practical in my experience. We might want that, but when you live outside of the city, I just know that in my area, there's lots of apartments and most people move in, and even though they have 1 space, they usually have 2 cars, and it just causes a lot of chaos. So that's my only concern.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Rosemary?
Laura, I just wanted to clarify, so there's currently an apartment building going up beside the trail.
Yes.
So this is, in addition, it'll be right beside it.
So on the original plan, there was, let me see, 3 apartment buildings. The one Diane Mcrae is currently constructing, and then there was then there was another lot which was purchased by another owner. And I believe on the original concept plan, that might have been like 40 units, and then another smaller building with 25. And they have come back for an amendment, and they increased that number. But this is the only building that essentially switched from apartment buildings, or from community care to apartment buildings. And then there was another lot that was designated for an apartment building as well, but Mark Mcrae bought that lot, and instead of developing an apartment building, he developed townhouses, so there was less units with the townhouses. So they do they balance out.
Yeah, I mentioned this before, but I think traffic's going to be a huge issue in Tower Road with all this development on both sides of the road.
We did allow for variance on all the buildings so that were originally approved. The 88 unit down below used to be, I think, for 60, so we increased that. The one that Diane has now was increased in density, and the one that's being proposed now is probably increased in density from what we initially expected. Fair to say, I think, so we've added floors to all of them. Anyways, Mr. Hambley, you had a question.
Continuing on with the traffic and that, when we're looking at this map here, the subject property, the one the numbers behind it, is that where the Diane Mcrae's apartment is going?
So
Or is it already under construction?
So, gosh, this
That'd
pointer.
be like under 072, right?
I never get
Or
it.
sorry, 702?
It's great until it, so do you see there's the square kind of adjacent to the trail? That is the parkland. Right above that to the north is the property that was purchased by another owner. Then you have the subject property, which is outlined in black, and right below it is Diane Mcrae's. And her lots are kind of, there's 2 or 3 separate parcels that's showing on that map.
Right. So there's, as was said, hers has 64 units?
Yes.
And then this one will be another 74, 138 units potentially coming into that driveway, plus the one that's 728.
88 units down below.
Which is another 88 that we approved. Months back or
I'm
whatever.
trying to remember, I know Diane Mcrae went for a variance on height, but I don't know if she went for a variance on density. I think she got a variance on height because there was an easement on her property and she had to go higher to get the same amount of units. I have to clarify that through some of our previous reports, but I know the other property owner that purchased from the Mcraes along adjacent to the trail, they did apply for a variance on density, and they also are putting in, I think it was 24 affordable units within their development as well.
So in that area then, there's over 200 units.
Oh, that's
That's right down near the corner.
And then proposed 300 some across the
And
road,
across the street.
plus what's coming next in the other bids, because there's 4 more bids in between what's being proposed.
So when this development was proposed in 2013, years ago, I mean, the other developments weren't contemplated at that time, so we've had a number of changes since, but these were the approved uses in the development concept plan, apart from the change from the 90-bed community care.
So if we,
Because this is where you would want density, is next to retail and shopping and those types of things.
and is there a plan to expand Tars Road? I thought there was maybe sidewalks going down there. Has that been approved?
It's still being talked about through Public Works. It is an initiative to put the trail down the side. So just that we're trying to figure all this out prior to going ahead and moving with these initiatives.
Right.
Figure out exactly what's going to happen.
Because those people that are doing those initiatives would be planning on potentially saying that the pin is here and not back 20 feet under their property in order to put in more wide roads and sidewalks and whatever.
I think one of the ways we can alleviate, I mean, we can have this discussion down the road with towers, but one way you can alleviate is put that right lane turn back onto Mount Edward that was taken out off towers. I don't know why it was ever taken out in the first place, but if we put that right turn onto Mount Edward, it would help with the congestion there. Anyways, that's a different Rich.
Is the green space that green line, or is that the trails?
That's the trail, and then the green space is adjacent to it to the south. It's that square parcel. I wish, I don't know if you got
This?
No, right below, right there. That's the green space.
This little square here.
Got one little square.
That's actually, I think, a little more than 10%, which is what was required.
That's still not a lot of green space.
That's what the bylaw requests or requires, and we can't require
That was
more than.
in there before all this other development is happening?
No, that was the agreement with this development, is that parcel plus the trails that went through it. And that's as per the bylaw, the requirement of the bylaw. We don't have the authority to ask for more than what the
I know.
bylaw requests.
The council can change the bylaw.
Yes. So here's my fears that and Laura, I heard you talk about this earlier. I heard the public meeting talking about the demand is not there today. But with our aging demographic, what means we have no way of knowing if the demand's not going to be there tomorrow. And my fear is that if this was a long-term plan back in the day to address a need, and we're saying we're going to jump ship from the needs that may be needed tomorrow, you know, are we going to get to a position where all of a sudden we're short of community care facility beds because we didn't have the foresight is the word I want to use to be able to and hold people to what they were going to build. I don't know. I mean, again,
But this, also, I would reiterate that this isn't a provincial initiative. This is a private initiative, so, I mean.
No one has those answers. I just throw it out there. Just when uses change from what the public kind of expected. And in this case here, this is, like I said, this whole, I mean, I don't need to remind you. I think we're going to go back and see how many times we've changed this, and I put my money on it 15, which is crazy to think that we've gone back to the public on 15 different occasions for one parcel of land. It's a lot. Councillor Drawn's right. I mean, it's back and back and back, and everything that was suggested that was going to be built originally, I don't know how much of it actually was built, because I think on the top lot was supposed to be a funeral home.
No, it was always meant to be townhouse.
It was amazing how it's just changed so many times.
We never had a funeral home incorporated into this.
I don't know, I'd like to go back to the napkins that were drawn on. All right. Yes, Mr. Fournier.
Does planning have any concerns about how many of these buildings are being built at once? I know tonight alone we have 200 on Sherwood Road, there's this, every night there's so much. Is there any concern the board, or like how quick we're growing with this stuff, or is there, you feel we're gonna need this like so quick? It just seems to all be happening at once. I mean, I sell houses, I know we don't have enough homes to sell because everyone, you know, is moving here. I guess with their rental rates, are we still that desperate for vacancies? Like, it doesn't seem like it is anymore, but maybe I'm wrong.
According to CMHC, we are, but.
We're still in dire straits.
But the city, it's kind of like if somebody wants to open a pizza shop.
Yeah, you gotta.
You can't control how many pizza shops open within your city.
Yeah. I guess what I'm
The
asking,
city can't
is there a
mandate how
master
many
plan, like,
apartment
do we-
buildings are built.
Yeah.
Like, we can't put a cap on it, but
No.
it's up to the developer to know their market requirements.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's up to us to know if it's an appropriate land use for the area.
We don't have a master plan though saying we need in the next 5 years, 5,000 more units or anything, do we?
Well, this is the great news, because CMHC does two things. One is that every fall they issue a vacancy rate update. And then every 5 years they do a housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment's being done in 2021. So that's that's really going to tell you what is needed, what type of housing is needed in Charlottetown. That'll give us a better picture of where we need to move forward. So I'd say by the spring of next year,
Yeah.
we should have a fairly, well, not just, I was gonna say a accurate vacancy rate, but who knows with COVID. But again, it's this 5-year plan that's put in place, which is what the needs.
I guess I just look back on the Frank Johnson days, right? I mean, it took us 4 years probably to get caught up with the rentals that were built at that time, right? You're not pinpointing him out, but there was a lot built at that time, so. Anyway, that's off the topic.
No, it's a good debate, because again, if we're
It
approving
just seems
things,
like every time there's 80 units, 96 units. Tonight there's 200 units in Sherwood Road, just was wondering.
it'd be nice to see more townhouse, duplex, triplex type construction versus large apartments at some point. It'd be nice to switch, because we've seen it even on this property here. I mean, the reason why Mr. Mcrae switched from an apartment complex to a duplex was because they were needed and wanted and moved very quickly. So I don't see too many duplexes not being rented out or bought very quickly. But there seems to be a big focus right now on tall buildings and maximizing the land use that may have to switch to still offer density, but a mixed density.
And that's-
Rosemary.
Will we have a chance to review the CMHC vacancy rates when they come out this month? Like, is that something we could look at as a committee?
Yeah, I mean, I encourage everyone to go onto the CMHC housing portal is what it's called, and you can do any kind of research you want on that. And there's so many different little nuanced little filters that you can put in, and it'll tell you everything from starts to what's in progress to completions to shows the vacancy rate for over a 5-year period. It's really good. It shows housing types. So I spend a lot of time on that portal just myself, just to keep my mind, wrap my mind around it.
And I think as a planning committee, it would be really good, to your point, Chris, like to kind of look at the big picture, and we're supposed to be planning, which implies we're looking at future needs, but
That's a
nature
good
of the
word,
committee
big
is kind of
picture.
reactive. We're kind of reactive.
As soon as you see an ad that says the first 2 months free, you know, no.
Well, I said to the province not too long ago, because they showed the vacancy rate doing this over the last 20 years, and I said it'd sure be nice to be able to take the two ends of that string and just pull it straight across, and have a consistent plan in place that says that we want our vacancy rate to remain anywhere between 3% and 6%, and put policy in place both provincially and municipally to say that this is how we're going to encourage or discourage or whatever different housing types to make sure that line stays in a healthy, as opposed to the ups and downs that we've seen over the last 20 years. How do you do it? I don't know. Anyways, all right. So on this project, do we have a motion that we want to put forward? Anybody? So staff's recommendation is to approve. Does anyone want to put a motion on the floor? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve staff's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All right, this is going to be an interesting vote. All right, so all in favor, please keep your hands up. Opposed? Councillor Duran.
I'm opposed.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. So the motion is carried, I believe, somewhere in the range of 7-3. All right, again, that's a recommendation to council. Towers Road. We're getting through them, folks. 505 Malpeck Road, Laurel, you're up again.
Okay. So this particular application, it's a little complicated. It's simple, but it is complicated. There's some small slivers of land that are proposed to be rezoned. So it's listed in the beginning of the report under recommendation, which parcels are proposed. But essentially, the proposal is to rezone the portion of land that is shown there in yellow from commercial, highway commercial to single detached residential R1L. And you see a dark green that abuts the parkland. That sliver of land is currently commercial, and the proposal is to rezone that to parkland, open space. And then along Patriot Lane, the proposal is to rezone that portion of land that is between the bulk of the property and Patriot Lane from open space to R1L as well. So the purpose of the request is to construct a single-family dwelling on the back of this property. The front of the property is currently occupied with a single detached dwelling, and the property owners, their son has asked to sever off the lot at the back, approximately 17,000 square feet, to construct this single-family dwelling. This proposal also went to Parks, and they reviewed it, and they're in agreement to giving the portion of land along Patriot Lane in exchange for that sliver of land that the property owner owns to expand their park. So what will happen, it will give this property owner frontage on Patriot Lane, and it will give the Parks Department a little bit additional land along their property. Patriot Lane, it's zone C2. It's a little bit different. It was developed a few years ago, and although it's zoned highway commercial, it was developed with semi-detached dwellings. So they were all semi-detached, and they stopped basically at the bulb of that cul-de-sac, and there was no development north of that cul-de-sac because that cul-de-sac the land north of that was owned by someone else. So it's kind of left a gap along Patriot Lane. So staff feel that it would improve the streetscape by expanding on, developing that area. A single detached dwelling is compatible to the semi-detached dwellings that are on Patriot Lane. As well over on Trailside Drive, that's zoned R1L. And there's a proposal for a subdivision in there. One phase has already occurred, and they have an application in to do phase 2, which would be another phase of single detached dwellings. So the area is, it's developing, and the uses that are developing around this particular lot are compatible with their proposal. Patriot Lane, it's fully serviced. It has water and sewer, and the official plan and bylaw, one of the main objectives is to make efficient use of already existing services. So this would be deemed an infill lot. Right now, that servicing on that street isn't being used to its full capacity, so this would add to it. It is a larger lot because of the depth of the property, but staff feel that it is an appropriate use in the area and that it is good infill development. The report outlines several policies in the official plan that would support this, and there's also a list within the report that describes the positives and neutral aspects of this development. So we feel that the proposal has merit, and it meets many of the technical requirements in the zoning bylaw and official plan, so we're recommending for it to proceed to public consultation.
All right, thank you, Laurel.
Oh, and I should note too, there is a revised report on your desk for this application. In the report, I described the land as parkland, and I should have said open space. So with the rezoning application, we have to make sure that all the requirements or all the descriptions are correct.
So this is just to go to a public meeting. Councilor Coney, do you have a? So moves just before you go. So the motion to accept staff's recommendation.
I'm okay with going to public.
Okay, moved. Just before you do that, Councilor Coney, I'll just see if there's a seconder, then you can.
Yes.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay, second it. Okay, open up for the.
Okay, and more just a comment. Again, Laurel, I've spoken to a number of the residents on Patriot Lane, and I think their thought was that what's there now is probably the end of the development, because like you say, at the top of the circle, whatever, call it open space or park, I think it was all city owned, so that I don't think anyone ever envisioned that we'd be kind of trading this piece for that piece to allow another lot to be developed, but
I mean, if you look at it, the piece of parkland, I wish this pointer worked, doesn't, maybe I'm just not seeing it, but it doesn't show up very well on the screen. But the piece of parkland that goes around the cul-de-sac, that, I mean, it's not usable land. What they're proposing to give for parkland is more beneficial to the city and parks and the residents than that strip of land around the cul-de-sac. Essentially what that strip of land does is just basically stops development from occurring on the cul-de-sac. So I think maybe there might have been fear of higher density development in that area, but with this being a single detached dwelling, staff would support that.
yeah, and that's my exact point. Call it what you want, that little perimeter at the top of the cul-de-sac is almost like a kind of like protection for the area that, you know, that it wasn't going to be developed.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions on this? We do have a motion on the floor to proceed to a public meeting, and it was seconded. Is there any comments or other questions that you have? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, opposed? Councillor Duran?
Hey, Jake, I had my mute button on. I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motion is carried. All right. So on to Mcrae Drive, Norwood Road. Welcome, Greg.
How are you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Good, good. Good here.
Good to see you again. Whenever you're ready.
Alright, so this is an application on the corner of Mcrae Drive and Norwood Road. The request is to rezone the majority of the property from the R1L zone to the low-density residential R2 zone, as there is a demand for duplex or semi-detached dwellings in the city.
I swear to God, I wasn't prompting that. He's smiling at me. I'm just sitting there downsized with the apartments.
So this is the current configuration of the property. You can see it's all zoned R1. There are two single attached dwellings on the property across the street, across Mcrae Drive. There's a number of single attached dwellings as well, and obviously one very large property containing a single attached dwelling and some form of equestrian stables, I guess. The request is to rezone the majority of it to the R2 zone. The plan here shows a public street going through from Norwood Road to Mcrae Drive, connecting both accesses. This application was sent around to, the original application was a cul-de-sac. It was sent around to the various departments, and the fire department required a second means of access on the property. There is a green space proposed around one of the existing single attached dwellings, which had preliminary review from the Parks and Recreation Department, no formal approval at this time, but essentially the remaining properties are R2. There is a little section that is R1, kind of in the middle of the property where the access comes out onto Mcrae Drive. So this application has some history a number of years ago. The applicants originally requested to go to R3. That application was withdrawn. They then decided to do all R2 on the property. It did go to a public meeting, and there was quite a bit of concern from the residents in the area that R1 uses should be across the street from other R1 uses to reflect how we kind of handled the East Royalton Master Plan. having like uses across the street. So in this case, you can see where the houses are on across Mcrae Drive. So the applicant is trying to mirror where the existing dwellings are. On the corner, they are looking to keep it R2, even though it does front on other R1 properties. They are currently vacant along Mcrae Drive. The properties along Norwood Road, while in the R1 zone, they are more of industrial uses. There are some pictures you can see on the right-hand side of what those uses look like. So while it isn't exactly what the public were looking for at the time, the public wanted R1 uses all along both streets. It is, in staff's opinion, a compromise that they at least were listening to some of the concerns that they weren't willing to listen to in the past. They're putting R1 next to existing R1 and across from single attached dwellings. The vacant property, they're looking to do R2 across from the vacant property. So staff are recommending that this proceed to public consultation, and I can answer questions.
Councillor McNaught, got this great. Councillor King.
Because I always need to understand. So you're calling Norwood Road, and I love that, but it's really not like any road, it's like the dump road. So is it ever going to be a road that would ever be, do we own that road as the city?
We do, yeah, it is.
Interesting.
Norwood does go, I guess like East Royalty technically turns into Norwood at that intersection. So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's not paved all the way to connect to Norwood Road, but technically it is owned by the city and is Norwood Road.
So we're going to do all this development. How do we get that road paved so that everybody has better access in and out?
Sounds like a council decision at Public Works Committee.
Okay, good point. Thank you. I just know that's good clarification.
Yeah, no, the part where they are looking to access onto is paved. You can kind of see on this plan that it is paved both ways. But it eventually Norwood Road does turn into
the road.
a gravel access. But where they're looking to pave, or where they're looking to put that road in is currently paved.
Greg, refresh my memory, but last time we took this to a public meeting, I think that there was a fairly large group of folks come out and voice their concerns. Was most of their concerns just around the whole mirroring and making sure that what they were facing is similar to what they have, and then they can do whatever they want behind? Or I just remember it being contentious at the time.
I know it did get deferred at one point, and the applicant went and had a neighborhood meeting kind of thing or talk to the residents at least to figure out what the exact concerns are. It came from that meeting that the properties that abut the two streets should be R1, but they had no concern with the interior properties. So this, I guess, is somewhat of a compromise. I mean, there are still R2s fronting on the corner properties, but they're not across from any existing dwelling.
Okay, I just don't want to see a rehash of basically, this coming back again, the residents coming out and saying, we're here again to voice the same concerns, just to make sure that this is different.
They're getting used to development in that area.
What's that?
They're getting used to development in that area. I think we will be looking at stuff like infrastructure and stuff to support continuous growth out there all around, so.
Some of the other concerns like directed to council is the increased traffic, will there be sidewalks along Mcrae Drive, and then was there any green space incorporated? So if you recall the last plan, there's no green space other than a strip around the corner, around the outside of the property. This one has a more significant part, I'll say.
I think duplexes are starting to be, I think people are starting to accept duplexes a little more than they used to. I don't think that there's a stigma attached to duplexes like there were in the past, and I'm serious when I say that.
They're affordable.
And they're nice. I mean, there's a lot of duplexes being built right now that are nicer than our homes.
And I think if you, the same developer developed Horseshoe Hills and Alice Avenue,
and that's a lot of duplexes.
And they're all a little wider street, underground services.
Yep.
So.
Okay. This is due to a public meeting, right?
It is.
Okay. Councilor McCabe, did you have a question?
No, I don't. I was
Okay.
gonna recommend, but I'll wait and let someone else.
All right. Just,
I'll move that we accept staff's recommendation to go to public.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Counselor Duran?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Motion is carried. All right, so number 9 is off, so we got 4 more, right? All right, number 10, which is lot 517 and lot 716, Corbett Drive.
Yeah, so this is a lot consolidation, looking to put 2 vacant properties that are located in the Business Park Industrial, I believe, or light industrial, M1 zone, so consolidate 2 properties. The purpose of the consolidation would be to construct a new commercial building. It's Mcrae, which is a HVAC retailer, which contain retail, office, and warehouse. So the properties abut a green space, open space that then abuts a residential development. So as far as this application, any consolidation that isn't R1 or R2 has to come to planning board and council for approval. As staff, we look at compatible land uses. In this case, they're putting 2 lots together for one larger industrial development instead of 2 smaller buildings. When looking at the compatibility with adjacent uses, obviously industrial and single touch dwelling don't always are seen as compatible. But when this subdivision was developed, you can see they intentionally put the landscape buffer between the 2 developments, so industrial and residential, to separate those land uses and mitigate any land use conflicts that may exist. In the plan, you can see the existing tree line, or in the Google Street View, you can see the existing tree line, which is fairly significant. So in this case, staff looked at the different aspects of the official plan around industrial, which is again primarily land use conflicts, and feel that these have been addressed during the subdivision, the original subdivision, and consolidating it doesn't change any aspect of this for the application other than 1 larger building instead of 2 smaller ones. So staff are recommending approval.
So not a rezoning?
No, just put 2 lots together.
All right, comments, questions, Councilor Cody?
Thank you. Greg, I don't know if it's a fair question, but when the 2 lots are going to contain retail, office, and warehouse use, and I know it's an HVAC company, do you have any idea what that would maybe look like on a day-to-day basis, what you'd be kind of looking at? Like, obviously it's, a sales office, they're going to store their inventory on site.
Yeah, my understanding is it's one business. It's not like a strip mall or anything with multiple, but it's one business, and they would essentially have a portion of the building's a showroom to show all their equipment, what you can purchase. They'd have a few offices for their employees, and then the rest of it would be kind of the warehouse where they would store all the material, bring the trucks in to distribute it. Be something similar to like Greenfoot. They sell same type of things. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can go in, you can see the product, but essentially they're delivering it to you to install it themselves.
Would it be similar to that company over in Causland Drive? That's just off the corner of St. Peter's in the bypass, we're off Ralden. There's a convenience store, but in behind they have that. Yeah. Not some, not the same company, but the same type of service. Or disruption, or whatever you want to call it, effect on the neighborhood. Go ahead.
So is this their operation currently on Riverside Drive?
I believe so.
Right. Relocated on Riverside potentially over to.
Yeah, I think just off Park Street maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
Corner of Park.
Yeah. I think that's what I understand.
So Summers kind of goes on.
Yeah.
So it'd be more potentially relocation.
Just to clarify where it is, trying to get the head around where we're trying to put the.
Yeah, McLean subdivision, just in behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you continue down Paramount, you might see that Supreme Homes, the modular homes you can purchase. They're on one of the lots to the south that fronts on the bypass. So the bypass would just be right at the bottom of that screen.
Again, the zone is, you go ahead, Reg.
Well, I was going to say I was going to move that we accept that recommendation.
Okay.
Consolidation refer.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation. Do I have anyone that would like to second that recommendation? Seconded by Chris, thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, opposed? Councilor Duran?
I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you, motion is carried. All right. On to 65 Walsh Road. And Shalyn, you can present this? No, no one there. Welcome back, Laurel.
Okay, so our next application is Welsh Road. There's a page on the top of that. I've also replaced, I copied and pasted this from the previous report with the bio comments because they're the same type of report. So I just didn't change the zoning on that. So just to clarify, I wanted you guys to have that replaced front page. So this application is to consolidate these properties that you see in blue. There's actually 5 properties there, but there is just 2 PIDs, and they're requesting that those 2 PIDs be consolidated. The reason why the additional properties are there, I believe, when we approve a subdivision, we require a perimeter deed, and if the developer doesn't get the perimeter deed done, or the lawyer doesn't draw it up, then it doesn't get changed over at mapping. So that's why those additional pieces of property are there. So I just wanted to explain that. Under the bylaw, for any land that's zoned other than R1 or R2, it's required to go through council for approval. So section 45.3.4A requires that land to be consolidated has to go to planning board for review and then to council for approval. The request is to consolidate the property so that Kent Building Supplies can expand their lumber yard and build a warehouse for additional storage. The warehouse is approximately 10,000 square feet and would require 10 parking spaces, and the land is large enough to be able to accommodate the additional 10 parking spaces. Staff don't see any land use conflicts with approving this request for consolidation, so we're recommending for approval.
Thanks, Laurel. I had to look at the map for a second. I'm trying to draw it out to see where Kent is, and I can see exactly where it is now. All right, any comments, questions? Seems pretty straightforward. Anybody want to put a motion forward? Okay, thank you, Reg. So moved to accept staff's recommendation, seconded by Mr. Hamblin. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Duran?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carried. All right, that's the number 12, bio comments. Laurel, I think you're still up. I guess you're up for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
All right.
So the bio commons, we've had this for us a number of times over the years. Again, it's a request under the previous section I discussed in the bylaw to consolidate these properties. You can see the 3 properties are outlined in purple, and they're in purple and outlined in black, and then at the along the borders of the properties there's some little slivers of land. Those are actually walkways that were left over from the original Biocommons development. The Biocommons originally, in its inception, it was zoned comprehensive development area, and there was a comprehensive development plan that was approved for that development. The Biocommons was to be developed as a campus-like development. It was supposed to be a research sort of park. And within the Biocommons, there was a central spline that went through, and then these little walkways that connected. the Bio Commons Park to Upton Farmlands. And the purpose of that was to foster integration when people were on breaks out and like from their office buildings, and it just kind of offered green space for them to mingle and walk to the Bio Commons Park, or to the Upton Farmlands. When Canada's Island Garden was developed, actually, that company bought up a large block of land, and the central walkway was consolidated into that property, and there were some other smaller pieces of walkway that were consolidated at that time. So it kind of took away the ideology of having these walkways and the open space within the park. Then just a couple years ago, I believe it was in 2018, the provincial government applied to have the restrictive covenants and the comprehensive development plan that governed the park rescinded, and they rezoned the land to business park industrial. So this is why they're back now, to basically get rid of the remnants that were there for the walkways, because they're of no benefit anymore. The concept and intent of the park has changed, and it's being developed in another manner. So staff don't see an issue with approving their request for lot consolidation.
All right, any questions? Those are pretty straightforward, I think.
I'll move to accept staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Okay. Moved and seconded. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Councilor Drawn? Okay, motion is carried. All right, last one of the evening. 13, River Ridge Drive.
Okay, so River Ridge Drive. This is also a lot consolidation. However, this required public notification because it's the property is zoned R3. When River Ridge Drive was developed, the property to the north was developed for low density development, and then south along River Ridge Drive was zoned for medium density residential, so apartment buildings. All these lots have been there since the original approval of the subdivision plan, and that would have been back, I've been here since 2005, so I believe this was approved in like 2003, 2004. So these lots have been there, they weren't developed until now. The previous developer built one apartment building, which you can kind of see, actually two buildings, which you can kind of see the north of these lots, and didn't continue on with developing the additional lots. So the new owner, Capri, has come in, and they would like to consolidate the three lots to the north, and then the other two to the south. The three lots, the lot that comprises lot 20-1, which is 1A, 2A, and 3A, which is currently shown on that plan, would be 73,000 square feet, and lot 20-A, which would be the new lot, would be 75,207.4 square feet when consolidated. They're proposing 58 units in each building on the lot. So you would end up with 2 apartment buildings as opposed to 5. Now, I did do a calculation a while ago, and I can't remember off the top of my head the exact numbers, but when you consolidate these lots, they become corner lots. So there is a requirement, a higher density requirement for a corner lot, so that you would get less units than if you were to leave them all as individual lots, because only the corner lots would be able to be developed, would require the higher density calculation, and the interior lots would require a less density calculation. The lots are adjacent to the school, they're near walking trails, parkland, there's transit in the area. The provincial government has just proposed a new acute care facility in the area with other forms of housing for people with specific needs in our community. So the area is being developed. We feel that this proposal is in line with the official plan and zoning bylaw. It's compatible for the area. There is, you'll see on that, the parcel to the north, there's, it's adjacent to some low-density residential. There would be a buffer required along that property boundary of 13 feet. So that's required under the bylaw for any mixed-use development or multi-unit development that abuts a low-density development. So they would be required to provide trees or fencing or a berm or a combination. So overall, we feel that this is appropriate. The letter was sent out. We didn't get any responses, and we're recommending for approval.
Thank you, Laurel. Chris, what are we up to now for units?
I don't know.
I was thinking you were doing
We got too many.
Another 174, and
Yeah.
a question on, we had
Yes.
a lot of concern around traffic just with the Hillsborough campus that's coming into play. And I think there was going to be some looking whether or not they were going to have better exit onto Riverside Drive. Correct me if I'm wrong. So here we're looking to add another 174 units without a plan of better access for traffic, even though I know they're as of right. But
This is a little different because they're already approved for building.
they are, I know. But are they going to build that right away, that way, or are they going to want to do it?
So here's the last, when we talked about the campus project, my understanding is that the province is willing to sit down. There's certainly no commitment on their behalf to putting an exit onto the bypass. But again, the argument can be made is that, again, by increasing the amount of density and sending all that through Patterson Drive, through a subdivision, again, it's very concerning for the neighborhood. And I think that those conversations do have to happen. But Chris is right. I mean, they are approved. Right now, they have the right zoning to build, but I think those conversations on traffic flow absolutely need to happen, and they need to happen soon. So maybe there's an opportunity to meet with Minister Myers and their crew to see if there's an appetite at all to do that. Because I think the poor people in Patterson, they're going to be overloaded here shortly.
Yeah. There's a variant.
By putting these together, then it's less units than potentially could be if they were separated?
Well, if you develop each lot separately, you've got two interior lots, so they require less square footage per unit. Your corner lot requires more. So you essentially have three lots that would require less square footage and two corner lots that would require more. But if you consolidate them all together, then you have two corner lots.
All right. Yes, Reg.
Who owns Capri?
They are a company, I believe, out of New Brunswick somewhere.
I think
Ontario, maybe Ontario. Yeah, maybe it's
That's close.
Yeah.
They're on this.
So there's no local ownership in that company?
It's a public company.
Yeah, yeah.
They own the other ones too, don't they? There's a couple of units there, the larger ones. I think they own most as well.
In the trailer park.
Yeah, well, they bought Hamleys, but I think they also own, don't they also own like shopping centers and like retail development? I think they might be involved with that as well.
Okay.
They own those two big units that are there?
Yeah, yeah.
And the subdivision. They bought everything from Wayne Hamley when he sold River Ridge subdivision.
Oh, right.
Because the thing with River Ridge, it was, and I believe it still is, it was a land lease community. So Wayne Hamley owned the lots, but rented them to the homeowners, and they placed the homes on the lots. And I think there might be like long-term leases or something with them.
All right. Anyone want to put a motion on the floor? This is for lot consolidation, right?
Yes.
Is there any indication that they are going to jump on and build? Have they expressed that point?
I believe I believe that is their intent, is to start construction this spring.
All right, Bobby.
I'll move we accept staff's recommendation.
To consolidate. Okay, moved and seconded. Perfect. All in favor? Opposed? Councilor Duran?
In favor.
Okay. Motion carried, and a motion to adjourn. Thank you. And,
Wow.
we're good. Just before planning board leaves, I just want to say that this is my final planning board meeting.